Good morning, Doug Barthel, Sioux Falls Police Chief, and joining me today is Lincoln County State's Attorney Tom Woolman. Just want to give an update on the murder investigation from yesterday. Just to start at the beginning, about 3:30 yesterday afternoon, our officers were called to 5605 West Misty Glen Place, which is a residence in Lincoln County. Initial reports were of a woman who had been involved in an altercation and was bleeding, and so officers responded. Through that initial response, there was also information that was put out about a possible suspect and some vehicle information. When officers responded to the residence, they encountered our victim, who is 53-year-old Brenda Lynn Hansen. That's Lynnhansen, 53 years old. She is a resident of that home, 5605 West Misty Glen Place. Life-saving attempts were conducted on our victim, and unfortunately they were unsuccessful. She was pronounced dead at the scene. The officers were involved in the initial location. We also had other officers that responded to a residence that we believed was associated with the vehicle that was seen leaving the residence. And that address was 2801 South Theodore Avenue in Sioux Falls. As officers were arriving on the scene, beginning to set up a perimeter around that residence, a male subject exited the front of the home, and our officers encountered him, and he was consequently taken into custody, and we'll get into the charges later, but he was actually the subject that was arrested for this crime. He was identified as John, John, Richard Senn, Senn. He's 41 years old and was residing at that address on South Theodore. Through the investigation, it was also determined that he had been to the Hansen residence on prior occasions, so the victim and suspect did know each other. He was also found to be in possession with some OxyContin pills that we believe came from that residence on Misty Glen Place. So there was somewhat of a drug connection there. Whether or not there were actual drug dealing or that sort of thing happening in that residence, it's hard to say at this point. We're still very early on in the investigation. We still have much to do to follow up with it. It's an unfortunate incident. Our hearts certainly go out to the Hansen family. It is also comforting, though, to know that we were able to resolve this case quite quickly. Matter of fact, from the initial time that we were notified till the time that we actually had a subject in custody was less than a half an hour. So our responding officers and investigators, along with the cooperation of the Lincoln County State's Attorney's Office, have done a fantastic job in this. As I said, much more work to do as we go forward, but I'll let Tom talk a little bit about some of the actual charges.
Well, thank you, Chief, and I would echo the Chief's comments. Certainly our hearts and our sympathies are with the victim's family in this matter. Of course, this is an ongoing investigation. It's in the very capable hands of the Sioux Falls Police Department. At this point in time, my office, as of this morning, has filed a criminal complaint. It's a 5-count criminal complaint alleging murder in the first degree, or in the alternative, count 2, murder in the first degree is charged as what we'd commonly refer to as the felony murder charge. Count 3 is murder in the second degree. Count 4 is robbery in the first degree. And count 5 is a burglary in the first degree charge. The murder charges all carry mandatory life sentences. The top count would be either punishable by a death sentence or mandatory life sentence. The criminal files at Lincoln County Criminal File 14-181. It's anticipated that the defendant will make an initial appearance this afternoon in Canton at 1:30. And at that point in time, of course, he'll be advised of his constitutional rights, and bond will be addressed at that point in time.
So obviously you believe he went into this home and took something of value from her, robbed her?
Yes, the OxyContin pills, we believe belonged to her, and that's what he took from the residence.
Was there forced entry into the home?
I'm not certain of that. I think he had actually knocked, but then entered the residence. I don't know as if there was force that went into it. We do know also that there were at least 3 other people in the residence at the time, and 2 preschool children, none of which were involved in the actual altercation. But obviously some of the information that they provided helped to quickly bring us to his arrest.
So can you talk a little bit about the injuries, the one that?
Of course, the autopsy has yet to be performed, but she had injuries that were consistent with knife wounds. So, you know, as far as how many and that sort of thing, we still need to work our way through the autopsy. But it does appear that at least initially, her death was caused by a knife.
Has that knife been found?
Not as of yet. We're still working through the investigation, and as I said, it's possible that if we get further into the investigation, discover that we haven't found that knife, that we may ask for the public's help.
Who called 911?
The other people that were in the residence. It's actually they aren't related, but they're roommates. So it was kind of a roommate situation where she had 3 other bedrooms in the home that were being occupied by other people. They weren't necessarily all of those roommates were there, but
So there were like 2 other adults in there?
there were actually 3 adults.
Does Mr. Lynn have any background in criminal activity?
I don't have all of his background. I believe he's been in Sioux Falls probably for the last 5 years or so.
Have you guys been able to determine, I guess, a solid relationship between the suspect and the victim?
No, and as I said, we're still in the investigation. Some of those questions may or may not ever be answered, as far as what the actual intent was, whether or not he had this in mind when he went there, or if it's something that developed while he was there. It's hard to say, but I do know that those 2 knew each other. It was not, I think it's safe to say that it wasn't any sort of a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship.
What led you guys to his home? What information did you guys get that directed you to that specific address?
We actually got he left the house in a vehicle, and so with that description and a license plate number, we were able to trace that back. It wasn't actually his car, but it belonged to a person that he was staying with on Theodore.
What kind of vehicle was that you described?
I believe it was like a white Kia.
So the other adult in the home at the time witnessed this happening, or called into 911 and saw him drive away with the information on the car, or how did that unfold?
No, the other people that were in the home did not actually, as far as we've determined so far, did not actually see the initial altercation. I think they heard the commotion, the yelling, and came from a back room after some of the, basically after she had already been stabbed, and then encountered this situation. It wasn't long after that he then fled the area, and that's when the call was made to 911.